Welcome to Healthy Kidneys After 60. I am your host, Jane Pauley. They say our kitchens are the heart of our homes, but as we cross the threshold of 60, could that same heart be hiding silent threats in the very places we feel safest? We spend decades building habits, believing we are doing the right thing for our bodies, only to find ourselves feeling slower, heavier, and perhaps a little more forgetful. Today, we are peeling back the layers of our daily meals to discover how small, everyday choices might be shaping our long-term health. Joining me is a man who has dedicated his life to bridging the gap between complex medicine and our daily lives, a renowned neurosurgeon and someone who truly understands the delicate balance of aging gracefully, Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Dr. Gupta, it is a privilege to have you here to guide us through this.
Thank you, Jane. It is truly an honor to be sitting here with you today. You know, in my years of practice, I have realized that the most profound shifts in health often do not happen in the operating room, but rather at the dinner table. We often view aging as an inevitable decline, a slow fading of energy and clarity, but science is increasingly showing us that we have much more agency than we think. I am excited to share some of these insights with your audience today, because it is never too late to start listening to what our bodies are trying to tell us. I hope that by the end of our conversation, our listeners will feel empowered rather than overwhelmed, knowing that even a single change in their grocery basket can lead to a much brighter, more vibrant future.
Dr. Gupta, I want to start somewhere very familiar, perhaps in the pantry or the back of the refrigerator of almost every senior listening right now. Many of us grew up in an era where convenience was a miracle, and stocking up was a sign of security. I can almost picture it now, those rows of glass jars, the pickled cucumbers, the canned soups, the quick-fix vegetables that sit waiting for a day when we are too tired to cook. It feels like home, it feels like comfort. But lately, I have been hearing a whisper of concern that makes me pause every time I reach for a jar. There is this haunting question in the back of my mind. Is it possible that these very comforts, these staples we have relied on for 40 or 50 years, are actually the things making us feel older than we are? Are we, in our attempt to be practical, inadvertently inviting a kind of silent exhaustion or even memory fog into our lives through something as simple as a jar of pickles or a can of salted peas?
Jane, that is such a poignant way to frame it, and you have touched on a reality that many people find quite unsettling when they first hear it. When we look at those jars and cans, we see convenience and tradition, but from a physiological perspective, especially after we pass the age of 60, our bodies begin to see them very differently. You mentioned that chilling feeling, and I think that comes from the realization that our internal chemistry changes as we age. For decades, the American Heart Association and health experts have been sounding the alarm on sodium. They recommend that most adults limit their intake to no more than 2,300 milligrams a day, but for the majority of us as we get older, the ideal limit is actually closer to 1,500 milligrams. Now, why does this matter so much now? Because about 70% of the sodium in our diets doesn't come from the salt shaker on the table. It is hidden inside those processed and canned goods you just described. When we are younger, our kidneys are like high-performance filters, efficiently processing and flushing out excess salt. But after 60, those filters naturally slow down. They become less resilient. When we consume high-sodium foods like pickles or canned vegetables, that salt stays in our system longer, pulling water into our bloodstream. This increases the volume of blood, which in turn puts immense pressure on our blood vessels and our hearts. It is like trying to force too much water through a garden hose. Eventually, the hose becomes stiff and the pump wears out. This tension isn't just about blood pressure numbers on a screen. It translates to that heavy feeling in your limbs, the puffiness in your ankles, and most importantly, it affects the delicate microvessels in your brain, leading to that brain fog or murkiness that many seniors mistake for a normal part of aging.
It is frightening to think that the very vegetables we think we are eating to stay healthy could be the delivery system for something so taxing on our systems. We are told, eat your greens, so we open a can of green beans thinking we are doing our duty. But if I am hearing you correctly, the vessel matters just as much as the content. It's almost a betrayal of trust. You think you're fueling your body, but you're actually adding to its burden. I wonder, for someone listening who feels that midday slump or notices their rings are a bit tighter than they used to be, is there a way to distinguish between good vegetables and those that are essentially wolves in sheep's clothing? It feels like we need to redefine what a healthy vegetable even looks like in our golden years, because the traditional definitions seem to be failing us.
You are absolutely right, Jane. We have to be more discerning now than we ever were in our 30s or 40s. The word vegetable has become a bit of an umbrella term that covers everything from a fresh, nutrient-dense head of broccoli to a can of salty, over-processed corn, and they are simply not the same thing. The betrayal you feel is real because the marketing often highlights the vegetable part while burying the sodium part in the fine print. When we talk about these wolves in sheep's clothing, we are looking at items where the processing has stripped away the fiber and the vital nutrients, replacing them with preservatives and salt to maintain shelf life. In this podcast series, I really want to help our listeners identify the 4 specific types of vegetables that might be tricking them. These are the ones that appear healthy but might be contributing to inflammation, blood sugar spikes, or that dreaded fluid retention. But I also want to offer hope. Just as there are vegetables that drain us, there are 4 powerhouse vegetables that can act like a tonic for the aging body. By the time we finish all 10 parts of this journey together, my goal is for every listener to have a clear, simple roadmap. We are going to name these deceptive vegetables one by one, and more importantly, explain why they behave the way they do inside a body over 60. It isn't about deprivation or a strict diet in the way we usually think of it. It is about making an informed trade. It's about trading that feeling of being heavy and foggy for a sense of lightness and clarity that many people haven't felt in years. If you stay with us, you'll see that a few small adjustments in how you view your vegetable drawer can truly make you feel like you've turned back the clock on your vitality.
Dr. Gupta, I have been thinking a lot about the solitary lives many of our listeners lead, especially those who have lost a partner and find the task of cooking a full meal for one person to be more of a burden than a joy. It is so easy to see why someone would reach for a can of soup or a jar of preserved vegetables because it feels like a small victory over the effort of the day, a way to save energy when the house feels a little too quiet. But I worry that this silence is being filled with a hidden cost that shows up in the body as exhaustion or swollen joints, and I wonder if you could help us understand the real-life consequences when convenience becomes the primary ingredient in a senior's kitchen.
Jane, you have captured the heart of a very common and very quiet struggle that I see in my clinic more often than people realize, and it brings to mind a woman I met recently named Helen M. She is 72 years old and lives at 18 Maple Ridge Drive in Dayton, Ohio. Helen is a wonderful, bright woman who lost her husband a few years ago, and she told me quite honestly that the kitchen she once loved had become a place of ghosts for her, so she started relying almost entirely on her pantry shelves. When I visited her, those shelves were a gallery of shiny tin cans and jars of pickles because they were easy, they didn't spoil, and they required no more effort than a can opener. Helen came to see me because she felt like she was walking through molasses every day. Her ankles were so swollen that she couldn't fit into her favorite shoes, and she was terrified that she was losing her balance. When we sat down and looked at what she was actually consuming, it became clear that her convenient meals were delivering nearly 4,000 milligrams of sodium a day, which is like an avalanche hitting a small creek for someone her age. For a person over 60, that excess salt acts like a magnet for water, forcing the heart to pump against a massive tide of fluid, and in Helen's case, it was literally stretching her blood vessels to their limit and causing that dizzy, heavy sensation she mistook for old age. It was heartbreaking to hear her say that she thought she was being smart by eating canned peas and pickled beets instead of fast food, not realizing that the salt used to preserve those vegetables was the very thing stealing her vitality.
It is so painful to hear that Helen was trying to do the right thing, and yet her body was reacting as if it were under siege, and it makes me think of so many others who might be sitting in their kitchens right now, looking at their own shelves and feeling that same sense of confusion. If the convenience we've been taught to value is actually a trap for the aging heart and kidneys, how do we begin to guide someone like Helen back toward a way of eating that doesn't feel like an impossible chore, but also doesn't leave them feeling like a shell of their former selves?
That is the essential question, Jane, and the answer lies in realizing that we can have convenience without the heavy price tag of chronic inflammation and fluid retention if we just change our strategy slightly. I told Helen that she didn't have to become a gourmet chef overnight, but we had to stop the flood of sodium that was drowning her system, so we looked at simple alternatives like frozen vegetables, which are often flash frozen at their peak and contain zero added salt, or even just the simple act of rinsing canned vegetables under cold water for a full minute to wash away a large portion of that preservative brine. When Helen made that one small change, switching from those heavy jars of pickles to fresh cucumbers with a splash of vinegar and moving from canned to frozen or low sodium options, the transformation was almost miraculous within just 3 weeks. She called me to say her shoes fit again and that the curtain in her head had finally lifted, proving that her body wasn't failing because of her age, but because it was struggling to breathe under the weight of all that salt. We have to remember that for the senior body, convenience should never be synonymous with chemical preservation, because our kidneys simply don't have the same capacity to forgive those mistakes anymore. It is about choosing the fresh convenience of a bag of spinach or a frozen bag of broccoli over the processed convenience of a tin can, because, as Helen discovered, the few minutes saved in the kitchen are never worth the months of fatigue and the fear of losing one's independence.
Dr. Gupta, there is a certain comfort in the golden glow of a cob of corn or a warm bowl of corn chowder that feels so wholesome and traditional, especially for those of us who grew up thinking of corn as one of the essential good vegetables of the American table. Many seniors feel a sense of pride in choosing a vegetable like corn over a piece of bread, believing they are making a lower carb or healthier choice for their energy levels. But I have noticed, and many of our listeners have mentioned, a strange sensation of feeling incredibly sleepy or foggy right after a meal that includes a lot of corn, and I can't help but wonder if this natural sweetness we love is actually a hidden source of trouble for a brain and a body that are trying to stay sharp after 60.
You've touched on a very deceptive area of the produce aisle, Jane, because corn is one of those foods that wears a mask. We call it a vegetable. But biologically and nutritionally, it behaves much more like a grain or a concentrated starch. When we are younger, our bodies can handle that quick hit of glucose quite well. But as we cross 60, our insulin sensitivity naturally begins to wane, and the way we process those starches changes dramatically. I often tell my patients that eating a large portion of corn is like sending a sudden surge of high-octane fuel into an engine that was designed for a much slower, steadier burn. What happens is that your blood sugar spikes rapidly, which feels fine for a moment, but then your body overcompensates, leading to a sharp crash that leaves you feeling cloudy, irritable, and deeply fatigued. This isn't just a matter of feeling tired. These repeated sugar roller coasters can lead to chronic inflammation in the brain, which we are now linking more and more to long-term cognitive decline. It is a sobering thought that the side dish we thought was benign could be contributing to that feeling of losing a step mentally.
It feels like a betrayal to realize that something so sun-kissed and natural could be causing such a turbulent reaction inside us, especially when we are just trying to enjoy a simple meal. If we aren't ready to give up that familiar taste entirely, is there a way to balance the pleasure of these starchy vegetables so they don't leave us feeling dimmed or disconnected from our own day? Or is it a matter of realizing that some things simply have to be left behind as we age?
It's not necessarily about a total goodbye, Jane, but it is absolutely about a radical rethinking of balance and portion, because the stakes are so much higher now for our metabolic health. I recommend that if you are going to have corn, you must treat it as your primary starch, the bread of your meal, rather than just another vegetable, and you should always pair it with plenty of fiber and healthy fats to slow down that sugar absorption. Imagine your digestive system as a busy highway. If you send the corn down alone, it's a speeding car that crashes into your bloodstream, but if you surround it with a big salad of leafy greens and some olive oil, you're essentially creating a traffic jam that forces that sugar to enter your system slowly and safely. I want people to pay attention to how they feel 30 minutes after eating. If you find yourself wanting to nap or struggling to follow the conversation on the news, your body is giving you a clear signal that the starch to fiber ratio is off. We have to become detectives of our own vitality, realizing that after 60, the sweetness of a vegetable like corn comes with a biological cost that we have to be willing to manage if we want to keep our minds sharp and our energy consistent.
Dr. Gupta, there is a specific kind of frustration that comes when you feel like you are doing everything right, avoiding the dessert cart, skipping the soda, and yet you still find yourself waking up with stiff, aching joints and a blood sugar reading that leaves your doctor shaking their head. It feels almost like a personal failure, or worse, like your body is playing a cruel joke on you despite your discipline. I hear from so many people who are genuinely confused because they've cut out the obvious bad things, yet they feel more inflamed and tired than ever. Could it be that the invisible sugars in things we consider healthy are the real culprits behind this mystery pain?
That confusion is so incredibly common, Jane, and it reminds me of a patient of mine named George P. He's 68 and lives at 410 West Meadow Lane in Wichita, Kansas. George is a retired engineer, a man who lives by the numbers, and was incredibly proud of the fact that he hadn't touched a candy bar or a piece of cake in 5 years. Yet he came into my office limping, his knuckles swollen, and his A1C levels creeping into the pre-diabetic range. He looked at me with such genuine exasperation and said, "Doctor, I don't eat sugar, so why is my body acting like I'm living on donuts?" When we walked through his daily routine, we found that George was a massive fan of corn muffins with breakfast, corn on the cob with lunch, and often a bowl of popcorn while watching the evening news, all because he believed it was a safe vegetable. George didn't realize that his body was breaking down those complex starches into simple sugars almost immediately, fueling a cycle of systemic inflammation that was settling right into his joints. For a man like George, those hidden sugars were just as damaging as a bag of white sugar because his 68-year-old metabolism couldn't distinguish between the two once they hit his bloodstream. It was a revelation for him to understand that his joint pain wasn't just old age or weather, but a direct inflammatory response to the high glycemic load he was putting on his system every single day.
It's a powerful lesson to realize that George's discipline was being undermined by a simple misunderstanding of what his healthy snacks were actually doing to his chemistry. It makes me wonder how many other people are out there suffering through knee pain or stiff fingers, thinking it's just the inevitable march of time when it might actually be a reaction to their vegetable choices. How do we help someone like George bridge that gap between what the label says and how their specific 60-plus body actually feels?
We have to teach people to listen to the language of pain as a form of biological feedback, Jane, because George's body was screaming at him through his joints, but he didn't have the dictionary to translate it. I told George that we needed to conduct an experiment. We swapped out his heavy corn intake for vegetables that are high in fiber but low in starch, like roasted cauliflower or sautéed peppers and onions, and the change in his inflammation markers was staggering. Within just a month, the swelling in his hands had gone down so much that he could go back to his hobby of woodworking, something he thought he had lost forever. The key for seniors is to understand that after 60, our glycemic threshold is much lower, meaning we can't get away with the same amount of starch we used to eat without triggering a pro-inflammatory response. I want everyone listening to realize that if you are suffering from unexplained aches, look first at the starches on your plate, even the ones that look like vegetables, and try replacing them with leafy greens or cruciferous vegetables for 2 weeks. Like George, you might find that your arthritis was actually just a dietary mismatch, and that the power to move without pain was sitting right there in your grocery cart all along, waiting for you to make a different choice.
Dr. Gupta, we are entering a territory that I know causes a lot of debate and anxiety among seniors, and that is the world of nightshades, tomatoes, potatoes, eggplants, and peppers. There is so much conflicting information online. Some people swear that these vegetables are the secret to longevity, while others claim they are the primary cause of debilitating joint pain and inflammation. It creates this terrible food fear where people are afraid to eat a simple garden tomato for fear of not being able to walk the next day. Can we clear the air on this? Is there a scientific truth hidden beneath all the anecdotes, especially for those of us who are already feeling the aches of our 60s?
This is one of the most frequent questions I get, Jane, and it is a complex one because the answer isn't a simple yes or no for everyone, but rather a matter of biological individuality. Scientific research, including studies from the Arthritis Society of Canada, generally shows that nightshades are perfectly healthy and packed with antioxidants for the vast majority of people. However, there is a small percentage of the population, particularly those with existing autoimmune issues or highly sensitive digestive systems, who may react to a compound called solanine found in these plants. I remember a woman I spoke with who was absolutely terrified of her evening salad because she had read a blog post saying tomatoes were poison for seniors. I told her what I tell everyone: science doesn't support a blanket ban, but it does support self-observation. For many, the pain they associate with nightshades isn't actually from the vegetable itself, but from how it's prepared. Think of the difference between a fresh, sliced tomato and a heavily salted processed tomato sauce, or a baked potato versus deep-fried French fries. The preparation often introduces the very inflammatory agents like trans fats and massive amounts of sodium that we then blame on the poor vegetable.
That distinction is so important because it moves us away from fear and toward a more nuanced understanding of our own bodies, which is where the real healing happens. But for those who are truly convinced that their morning stiffness is linked to that eggplant parmesan or the peppers in their omelet, what is the responsible way to test that theory without depriving themselves of important nutrients? Is there a gold standard for figuring out if you are one of the few who truly needs to avoid this group?
The best approach, and the one I recommend for anyone over 60 who is feeling stuck, is a structured elimination trial, Jane. You don't just guess, you take 3 weeks and completely remove nightshades from your diet while keeping a very careful journal of your pain levels, your sleep quality, and even your mood. At the end of those 21 days, you reintroduce them one by one, maybe just a few cherry tomatoes on day 1, and watch your body's reaction like a scientist. If you find that your joints flare up within 24 hours, then you have your answer for your specific biology, and you can make an informed choice to limit them. But what many people discovered during this trial is that it wasn't the tomato at all. It was the salty dressing or the white bread they were eating with it. We have to be careful not to make villains out of nutrient-dense foods based on internet rumors, but we also have to respect that an aging gut can be more sensitive to certain plant compounds. The goal is to eat with confidence, not fear. I want our listeners to feel empowered to test these things for themselves because the most accurate lab in the world is your own body's response to the food you give it. If you can eat a sun-ripened tomato from your garden and feel great, then by all means enjoy that gift of nature. Don't let a one-size-fits-all headline take that away from you.
Dr. Gupta, there is a very specific kind of exhaustion that isn't just about being tired. It's a feeling that your body is on fire from the inside out, a dull, persistent heat in the joints that makes every movement feel like an uphill battle. I think about the many seniors who wake up feeling 20 years older than they actually are, and they just sigh and reach for the ibuprofen, assuming this is the price of a life well lived. But you've mentioned that sometimes this fire is being fueled by what we put on our plates just hours before, and I wonder if you could share how we can tell the difference between normal aging and a body that is actively reacting to its fuel.
That internal fire you're describing is exactly what chronic low-grade inflammation feels like, Jane, and I saw a classic example of this in a patient named Margaret S. She is 74 and lives at 95 Sunstone Avenue in Mesa, Arizona. Margaret came to me because she felt like her life was shrinking. She had stopped going for her morning walks because her knees felt heavy and hot, and she was convinced she needed a double knee replacement. When we started talking about her diet, she mentioned that she loved comfort foods like eggplant dishes and fried potatoes, especially in the evenings. Margaret didn't realize that her 74-year-old system was struggling to process the combination of the nightshade compounds and the high heat oils she was using to cook them. It was as if she was throwing dry brush onto a smoldering fire every single night. I told her that her pain wasn't necessarily a sign that her joints were worn out, but a sign that her biological bucket was overflowing with inflammatory triggers. We worked on a plan to shift her cooking methods, moving away from frying to steaming and roasting with just a touch of olive oil. And we specifically looked for those warning signs, like feeling a strange thirst or a noticeable puffiness in her fingers about 2 hours after she ate.
It is so striking that Margaret felt her life was shrinking because of something that was ultimately within her control. And it makes me think about the psychological toll that chronic pain takes on a person's spirit. When you're 74, being told you might not need surgery, after all, just by changing how you cook your vegetables, must feel like being given a second chance at life. How do we help people recognize these early warning shots from their bodies before they reach the point of giving up on their favorite activities?
We have to shift our perspective from suppressing symptoms to listening to signals, Jane. For Margaret, the breakthrough came when she realized that her bad days almost always followed a day of eating highly processed or fried nightshades. I asked her to look for what I call the post-meal heaviness, that feeling where your body just wants to shut down and your joints feel stiff as soon as you try to stand up from the table. That isn't digestion. That is a systemic inflammatory response. Once Margaret saw the pattern, she felt a sense of power she hadn't had in years. She started choosing steamed broccoli and spinach over those heavy fried dishes, and within weeks, that heat in her knees began to dissipate. She told me something I'll never forget. She said, "Dr. Gupta, I thought I was just an old woman, but it turns out I was just a woman who was eating the wrong things for my age." That is the message I want everyone to hear. You aren't broken just because you are over 60. You are simply in a new phase of life where your body requires a more refined, cleaner fuel. When you stop burning your system with the wrong choices, you'll be amazed at how much life is still left in those joints.
Dr. Gupta, there is a very common health trap that many seniors fall into, and it comes from a place of genuine good intention. We see people who are so proud to tell us, "I eat a big salad every single day," and yet they are still struggling with low energy, brittle bones, and a feeling of being generally run down. It's so confusing for them because they feel they've done the hard work of choosing a salad over a burger, but the results just aren't showing up in their blood work or their energy levels. Is it possible that the green we've been told is the gold standard of health is actually just empty water?
You have hit on a very real phenomenon, Jane, which I call the illusion of the healthy salad, and it often centers around one very popular ingredient, iceberg lettuce. I think of a man named Robert T., who is 76 and lives at 227 Harbor Palm Court in Tampa, Florida. Robert was a very disciplined man who took his health seriously, and he took great pride in his daily salad. But when he came to see me, he was pale. He was constantly catching every cold that went around, and he felt a persistent flatness in his mood. When we looked at his healthy salad, it was almost entirely iceberg lettuce, which, while crisp and refreshing, is about 96% water. For a man in his 70s whose ability to absorb nutrients is already naturally declining, filling up his stomach with something that has almost no fiber, no vitamin K, and no folate is essentially a form of nutritional displacement. He felt full, so he wasn't eating the things that actually contained the building blocks his body desperately needed to maintain his bones and his immune system. He was full on the outside, but starving on the inside.
That phrase, starving on the inside, is so haunting because it suggests that Robert was doing the work but not getting the reward, which is a heartbreaking place to be when you're 76 and trying your best. It seems like the salad has become a sort of nutritional decoy for many people. How do we help someone like Robert understand that not all greens are created equal, and that after 60, we can't afford to waste a single bite on filler food that doesn't contribute to our longevity?
It's about moving from quantity to density, Jane. I explained to Robert that every square inch of his plate is prime real estate now, and he simply can't afford to let iceberg lettuce occupy so much of it. I told him to think of iceberg lettuce like a glass of water with a crunch. It's fine for hydration, but it's not food in the way his body needs it. We started a simple transition where he began mixing in dark, leafy greens like spinach, kale, and arugula, greens that are packed with the lutein and zeaxanthin his eyes need and the vitamin K his bones require. At first he missed the familiar crunch, but once he started feeling the surge in his energy and saw his lab results improve, he realized that the work of eating a salad was finally paying off. We also had to look at his dressings. He was covering his watery lettuce in sugary, salty bottled dressings that were doing more harm than the lettuce was doing good. For anyone over 60, the salad trap is real, but the solution is so simple. Trade the pale greens for the dark ones. Your body will thank you with a level of clarity and strength that a bowl of iceberg lettuce could never provide.
Dr. Gupta, we have spent a lot of time talking about what to avoid and the traps that can catch us as we age. But I want to pivot toward the hope and the practical steps that our listeners can take today. I think the most daunting part of health advice for seniors is the feeling that they have to overhaul their entire lives, which feels impossible when you're already tired. But you often talk about the power of micro changes, those tiny, almost invisible shifts that can yield massive results. Can you show us what that looked like for someone like Robert and what those 4 small habits are that can truly turn the tide for someone feeling stuck?
I love focusing on these small wins, Jane, because they are the foundation of sustainable health. Robert, the gentleman from Tampa we just spoke about, is the perfect example of this micro shift strategy. He didn't have to throw away his whole kitchen. We just focused on 4 very specific, manageable habits. First, we did the green swap, moving from iceberg to dark leafy greens. Second, we tackled the canned purge, replacing his salty canned vegetables with frozen ones, which he found just as convenient but far more vibrant. Third, we implemented the starch rule, keeping corn and potatoes to just a small portion of the plate and never eating them alone. And fourth, we simplified his cooking, switching from heavy, creamy sauces to a simple drizzle of high-quality olive oil and lemon. Robert told me that for the first few days, it didn't feel like he was doing much, but by the end of the second week, he woke up before his alarm clock for the first time in years. He felt tin, as we say, awake, alert, and present in a way that he hadn't been.
It's incredible how those four pillars, the green swap, the canned purge, the starch rule, and the simple drizzle, can create such a profound shift in someone's daily experience. It takes the fear out of the process when you realized you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be intentional. For those listening who are ready to make just one change this week, which of these would you say has the most bang for the buck for a brain that is feeling a little foggy or a heart that is feeling a little sluggish?
If I had to pick just one, Jane, it would be the green swap. There is a wealth of research, including some very compelling studies mentioned by the National Institute on Aging, that shows a direct link between consuming at least one serving of dark leafy greens a day and a slower rate of cognitive decline. It's like insurance for the brain. For Robert, that one change, incorporating a handful of spinach or kale into his meals, was the catalyst that made everything else feel possible. When your brain starts to receive the folate and the antioxidants it has been craving, your willpower and your mood improve, making it much easier to tackle the other three habits. I want to tell every senior listening, you don't have to climb the whole mountain today. Just change your greens. Start with that one micro habit this evening. When you realize that a simple leaf can make you feel more like yourself again, you'll find the momentum to reclaim the rest of your health, one small, delicious bite at a time.
Dr. Gupta, we've arrived at the moment I think everyone has been waiting for. The gold list. We've talked about the wolves, the decoys, and the traps. But now I want to give our listeners a clear, definitive guide to the heroes. If you could walk into a grocery store with one of our listeners today and fill their cart with the four most valuable vegetables for a body and a mind over 60, the ones that are truly worth the money in terms of biological impact, which ones would you choose and why are they so essential for this specific stage of our lives?
I would love to do that, Jane, because these four are truly the superstars of the aging body. First on my list is spinach and its dark leafy cousins. As we just discussed, the impact of these greens on brain health and memory is unparalleled. They are packed with vitamin K, lutein, and folate, which act like a protective shield for your neurons. Second is broccoli and the cruciferous family, like Brussels sprouts. These are powerhouse vegetables because they contain a compound called sulforaphane, which has been studied extensively for its ability to activate our body's natural antioxidant defenses and support the biological detoxification processes that slow down as we age. Third, I would reach for carrots. For seniors, the beta-carotene and vitamin A in carrots aren't just for vision, they are crucial for maintaining the health of our skin and our immune barriers, which are our first line of defense against illness. And fourth, I would include beets. Beets are incredible for the aging heart because they are high in natural nitrates, which our bodies convert into nitric oxide, a molecule that helps our blood vessels relax and stay flexible, naturally supporting healthy blood pressure.
That is such a powerful and clear list. Spinach, broccoli, carrots, and beets. It feels manageable, and it feels like a real prescription for vitality. But I know many of our listeners might be thinking, I've tried those and they're either bitter or I don't know how to cook them without making them mushy. How do we make these hero vegetables taste like something we actually want to eat rather than something we have to eat? And are there any common mistakes that could strip away their magic before they even hit the table?
That is a great point, Jane, because medicine only works if you actually take it. The biggest mistake I see is boiling the life out of these vegetables until they are gray and unappealing. For someone over 60, we want to prioritize steaming or a light sauté in olive oil. This keeps the nutrients intact and maintains a bit of texture, which is important for our digestion. For broccoli, try roasting it with a little garlic and lemon. It completely changes the flavor profile from bitter to nutty and sweet. For beets, I love to roast them to bring out their natural sugars. And a very important pro tip for my fellow seniors. Always eat these vegetables with a little bit of healthy fat like olive oil or avocado, because many of these vital nutrients like vitamin K and beta carotene are fat soluble, meaning your body can't actually unlock and absorb them without that fat. So don't eat them plain. Embrace the flavor. Use herbs like rosemary or turmeric to add an extra anti-inflammatory boost. And remember that when you eat these 4 gold vegetables, you are quite literally feeding your future self the strength and the clarity you deserve.
Dr. Gupta, as we come to the end of this journey, I am struck by a feeling of profound hope. We started in a kitchen filled with traps and fears, but we are ending with a clear path forward. I think the deepest fear for many people listening, the ones in their 70s and 80s, is the belief that the ship has sailed, that they've made too many mistakes for too many years, and that their body is now a lost cause. They worry that they are destined to be a burden to their families. What would you say to the person sitting alone right now, feeling like it's just too late to start?
Jane, if I could reach through this microphone and take their hand, I would tell them with absolute certainty your body is a miracle of resilience, and it is never, ever too late to begin the process of recovery. I have seen people in their late 80s reclaim their mobility, their clarity, and their joy just by making these micro shifts we've discussed. Age is a number, but vitality is a choice we make with every forkful. If I could leave you with 3 golden rules to carry into tonight's dinner, they would be these. First, respect your salt threshold, read those labels, rinse those cans, and let your kidneys breathe again. Second, make the green handful a daily ritual. Treat that serving of spinach or kale like the most important medicine you take, because it is. And third, be kind to your system by choosing simple over processed. Your body doesn't need huan trang or elaborate meals. It needs the steady, honest nourishment of real food. You don't need to go back to being 30. You just need to be the healthiest, most vibrant version of yourself at 70, 80, or 90.
That is such a beautiful and reassuring message, Dr. Gupta. Age is a number, but vitality is a choice. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here with us, for translating the complex language of science into the language of the human heart, and for giving us all a reason to look at our dinner plates with excitement rather than dread. It has been an absolute honor to learn from you today.
The honor was mine, Jane. Thank you for creating a space where we can have these vital conversations. To everyone listening, remember that your health is a journey, not a destination. Start small, be patient with yourself, and know that every positive choice you make tonight is a gift to your future. I look forward to hearing about your progress. Goodbye for now, and stay healthy.
And to our wonderful listeners, thank you for joining us on Healthy Kidneys After 60. We hope this conversation has shed some light on the simple ways you can protect your health and your happiness in the years ahead. If you found this helpful, please subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our upcoming episodes, where we will continue to explore the secrets to aging with grace and strength. Remember, you have the power to change your story one meal at a time. Until next time, I'm Jane Pauley. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.